welcome to the June the 12th, 1990 taping of It Happened in Grand Prairie, as we bring you the history of Grand Prairie and those that have helped make that history and are continuing to do so. This is our history tape number 122. We are very privileged today to have a very special public servant with us today. Mr. Joe Cantrell is the postmaster of Grand Prairie, Texas. And Mr. Joe, we'd like to welcome you to the show.
Thank you very much. Glad to be here.
We're just so glad to have the man that answers to the come rain, come shine, come whatever the mail goes on. And that is unless we have floodwaters over the Trinity River, right? All right. Mr. Joe, we'd like for you to look out into your camera over on our left and establish your genealogy. We'd like for you to give your mother and father's name and maybe a little bit about your family, your personal family when you were growing up, when you were born, where, and we'll ask you some more questions about that. Would you do that for us now?
All righty. Well, let me start way back with my father. My grandmother and grandfather Cantrell came to Texas from Arkansas in 1900, and they stopped in Cleburne, Texas long enough for my dad to be born, and consequently he was John Cleburne Cantrell.
Oh, wonderful.
Many years later, Dad worked for Chance Vault, North American LTV, and all the different names they had until he passed away in 1960.
All right.
My mother was a Lillian Pierce Cantrell, and when the Cantrells went on through Cleburne and settled down in the Maybank area, my father met my mother, and I was born in a little place right outside of Maybank called Prairieville.
All right.
So that's where we came from. When I was 6 years old, we moved to Dallas, and so I spent all of my time in the Dallas area, went through the Dallas school system, attended elementary school over in the West Oak Cliff area at Sidney Lanier, and then attended high school at Adamson High School in Oak Cliff. And in 1960, I guess 62 or 3, somewhere along there, moved to Grand Prairie. And except for a stint of 8 years that I spent as postmaster in Bonham, Texas, up in northeast Texas, I've lived here in Grand Prairie.
All right. Now, let's get back down to Maybank and the area where you grew up as a young man. Tell us a little bit about the Lillian Pierce family. You know anything about the Pierces?
Yes, it was a very interesting thing. My grandmother Pierce, my mother's mother, is still alive. She'll have her 103rd birthday this November.
Mercy.
We're all looking forward to that. Saw grandmother just this past week, and she's still doing well.
Where does she live?
She lives down on Cedar Creek, not very far from where she started those many, many years ago. When grandmother and grandfather Pierce settled, they settled her in Travis County. And a cousin wrote to my grandfather and said that there was a farm, a fruit farm, that was available down around Maybank if he would like to move there and take care of it. And back in those days, if you'd take care of the farm, it was sharecropping deal. So anyway, my grandfather Pierce came here as a sharecropper running a fruit farm in the Maybank area. The first couple of years, they didn't do too well, and so they moved back down around Austin, Texas. And then after a couple of years came back. Now, grandmother tells a story that I think is really funny, and it's interesting at least, maybe not funny, but she said the first time they came to the Maybank area, they came by train. The second time, they came by wagon train. Grandmother said they'd been out about 3 days on the road and had stopped and was fixing supper. You know, they had to gather up the brush and the twigs and build the fire, and said another wagon way up on the horizon came by, and a guy stood up. Man, my grandfather's name was Joe too. I'm named after my two grandfathers. Grandfather Pierce was Joe, and my grandfather Cantrell was Allen, so I'm Joe Allen.
All right.
So, okay. At any rate, this other wagon came by way up on the horizon, and Grandmother Pierce said she had no way of knowing who was in it, but the guy stood up on the wagon seat and hollered, "Hi, Joe," at my grandfather. And they don't have any idea until this day who that was, because they were way up on the horizon. And my grandmother, when I was talking to her the other day, this was a question she still had on her mind. I wonder who that was in that wagon.
Here she is, 103, and still wonders who was in the wagon.
Still wonders who waved at them in the wagon when they were coming back. But they settled here, and they've stayed in that area ever since. Of course, what we know as Cedar Creek Lake was barely a stream then. There was no such thing as the lake as we know it today. but she lives right there on the lake now.
All right, now, Mr. Joe, when you were growing up as a young man, where did you go to school in the area there? Name the school and whether it was a big-time school or a two-room schoolhouse or what?
Well, it was as I said, I came to Dallas when I was 6 years old, and so I started in the Dallas school system and attended Sidney Lanier School, which is just right up the road here off of Fort Worth Avenue. And it was a pretty big-time school. It was 3 stories now. There wasn't anything like that in Maybank.
No.
We didn't have nothing 3 stories in Maybank, so a 3-story school was a big deal. But it was a very good school. I think they did all they could with me. I had at least a chance. Then when I finished there, I went to Crozier Tech, the old technical school in downtown Dallas for a couple of years. And the last 2 years, I attended Adamson High School in Oak Cliff.
And you were a leopard all that time that you attended Adamson.
Adamson, yes.
Yeah, well,
we were at Tech, yes.
All right, we were rivals because I was the Sunset Bison, so we were real big rivals. Tell me about Sidney Lanier. Now, this little elementary school, is it still in existence?
It's still in existence, going strong, and an unusual thing, maybe at least to me it seems unusual, we have an elementary school reunion every year, the last Sunday of May, and we meet in Kessler Park over in Dallas there. And all of the folks that went, we don't have any time or ending time, and so it's neat that you run into a mirage of people from 100 years old to some that have just been out for a few years, and we meet over there. A very interesting thing happened last year. We had a library teacher. Now, when the weather was bad and we couldn't get out and play at play periods and that sort of thing, we all had to go to the study hall. And if the weather was bad for 2 or 3 days and we were all youngsters and full of energy, and if we got a little out of hand, the library teacher, to quieten us down, would read us Uncle Remus stories. And last year at our reunion, she came to our reunion and read us an Uncle Remus story.
Oh, that was great.
It was really enjoyable.
And I've not ever heard of an elementary school reunion, so that's one of the first on our show, and we're glad to hear about that. Now, did you have any brothers and sisters, Mr.
I
Joe?
have a brother named Harold. Harold lives in Ross City, right up the road, not very far. And I have a sister named Anita, who lives right here in Grand Prairie on Carrier Parkway.
All right, Anita's last name now is?
White.
Is Anita White.
Anita White, yes.
Good, that is great. All right, now, do you have a personal family of your own?
Yes, I have 3 children. I have a daughter, Deborah, who lives in Henderson now, and I have 2 sons, Jody and Mitchell, and both of them live here in Grand Prairie. And Jody is employed in the Postal Service in Arlington, and Mitchell is an LTV employee.
All right. Do they have families, and do you have any grandkids?
Yes, I have a mess. I've got 2 girls and 2 boys, 2 grandsons, or 3 grandsons. My daughter has a son, Daniel, and he lives here in Grand Prairie.
Where does he go to school?
He'll be going next year to South Grand Prairie High School,
Oh,
as will my oldest son's son, Bradley. He'll be going, and I'm not sure Brad, he lives sort of on the line, and I'm not sure he's made up his mind. His mother attended Grand Prairie High School, and his father attended South Grand Prairie, so they're not sure about that, but I guess that'll be worked out. And then he has a younger brother, Timothy, and Timothy is going to Lee Middle School.
All right, so you have almost all of them very close by, don't you?
Yes, I do, and I have 2 step-granddaughters, and one of them just graduated. Michelle just graduated from South Grand Prairie, and Jennifer will she'll be a cheerleader there next year, South Grand Prairie.
All right, and are these all Cantrells, or do they have your daughter's other name?
The daughter's other name, their name is Burns. But,
Burns, okay. Well, we got to get the right name with the right kids at South and wherever. All right, so when y'all have a family reunion, y'all just really have a blast.
Yes, we do. We just have all kind of names.
And in 1962-63, that brought you to Grand Prairie, and evidently from the Bonham area is the Bonham postmaster. Did you come from Bonham directly to Grand Prairie?
No, I was working in the Dallas post office at the time, and I came out here because my mother and father were living, or Dad had passed away in 1960, and I came out here to be closer to Mother, and we liked it and we stayed. No, I didn't go to Bonham until 73. I worked in the Dallas post office. In 1956, I began work for the post office department as a temporary, indefinite substitute carrier.
And in what town?
That was in Dallas.
That was in Dallas, okay.
The only guarantee I had, they guaranteed me that they would give me 2 hours work any day that they called me in. Now, that doesn't mean they're going to call me in every day.
Yes.
And they're going to pay me the grand sum of $1.86 an hour for those hours I was there. And back then, there was no such thing as overtime. We
Right.
could work all the hours we could get for $1.86, but no overtime. So, at any rate, I'd come from working, I worked when I first got out of high school, and then I spent a little military time.
In what area?
In the Army.
In the Army, okay.
I was a tanker,
All right.
and spent my time there, and then I went to work for Sears Roebuck. Sears paid me $1 an hour, and I worked there almost a year and was up to $1 and a dime. Then I went to work for a company in Dallas called Mosier Steel.
Heard of that.
I worked for Mosier Steel for almost a year, and I went to work there for $1.25 an hour and worked for up until I was making $1.35. Now, when the post office offered me this big job at $1.87, I thought there can't be that much money in the world. So I took it.
Yes.
And I've been with them ever since, and they've been very good to me.
And progressed right on along to Dallas, to Bonham, and back to Dallas, and then to Grand Prairie, Texas.
Back to my hometown, which was a dream. It was a very interesting thing that I was in Bonham, and I had been offered a job as a trainer in our training academy in Bethesda, Maryland. And I had accepted that position, and the Grand Prairie job came open. And so I sent in my resume and asked to be considered for the job in Grand Prairie, never thinking that I would have the opportunity to go back to my hometown and be postmaster. And the gods were smiling on me, and I got the position and never spent any time in Bethesda, Maryland. So I didn't get to be a school teacher.
And you do live here in Grand Prairie, Texas?
Oh, yes. Yes,
Great.
definitely.
Love Grand Prairie, Texas. All right, now, we're going to get down to a little bit of nuts and bolts about the post office of Grand Prairie, Texas, and I know you've done a lot of research on it, and I've done a little bit of research on it. So I'd like for you to tell the people in our viewing audience how long Grand Prairie has been established as a post office, even before it was called Grand Prairie, and I'd like for you to give us the first postmaster's name.
I'm going to have to look at your list to come up with that first postmaster's name.
Oh, okay. Why don't we look at my list right here, because that's very exciting.
Yeah. William Haskett, William Haskett was the first postmaster.
And what was that magic date?
Yeah, appointed October the 27th in 1874. Now, it's interesting that this is not the first time Grand Prairie had postal service.
No.
We had postal service since way back, I think, about 1842.
But it was Pony Express and et cetera?
That's right. It was Pony Express, and it was individuals who owned groceries. At that time, because the grocery or the store was the gathering spot, this was used as the postal depot normally, and that's what happened. And back that time also, postage wasn't the way we know it today, where you'd buy a stamp and affix it. This didn't come along for many, many years. At this time, it was almost like an individual contract job. If you owned the grocery store and you wanted to deliver the mail, you charged whatever you wanted. If you thought it was worth a nickel for you to deliver a letter to me, well, you just charged me a nickel when you brought my letter. And if you thought it was worth a dime, well, then I had to pay you a dime.
Like a sale.
That's right. That's sort of the way it was. And of course, there was no great, there was a great postal service in Washington, D.C. that has been there forever, but once it got out on this end, there was very little that went back to that post office department.
Would you like to tell us some of the Pony Express stops that possibly were here in Grand Prairie, Texas, like the one down at the Jordan Bowles Ranch was one? And
yes, it surely was. The first Pony Express started and ran from St. Joseph, Missouri over to Sacramento, California, and then of course they branched on out. And it was interesting, I brought a little advertisement that appeared in the paper, and I thought this was very interesting.
Read that for us.
It says, "Wanted, young, skinny, wiry fellas, not over 18 years of age, must be expert riders, willing to risk death daily, and orphans are preferred. The wages were $25 a week, and you supply your own horse."
Oh, that is exciting for Pony Express.
Yes, it is. It's very interesting, and these, there were a lot of people in there. Bill Cody was a Pony Express. Buffalo Bill Cody was a Pony Express rider, and there were several others that
Became famous in our history.
Yes, yes,
You
and some
bet.
people that did heroic deeds to protect the mail that you just wouldn't believe. They really did put their life on the line every day. They had to fight their way through the Indians and, of course, the weather and just all of the other things. Some of the things that the Postal Service has done, and I think this is rather interesting, many of the roads that were established during those early days were established by the postal carriers. In fact, some of the first roads over the mountains, we were forever and ever trying to get there faster with the mail. It's interesting that when California was given statehood, it was 2 weeks before the message was received, before they knew they were a state.
Yes.
Because it took that long to get the mail
Get the
through. And
mail.
we were forever trying to find a shorter and a better way. And so many of the mountain passes, many of the mountain roads, many of just about anything that you want to mention were established by the postal carriers trying to get there a little faster, and the Pony Express being part of them.
One exciting thing that I've noted on this list that we have gotten from Washington, D.C. is that a Mr. Deckman established our town, D-E-C-H-M-A-N.
Right.
But in the transition, and I've written them 4 letters, and each time they write back and said the first post office in D-E-C-H-M-A-N, Texas, was spelled D-E-C-K-M-A-N. So the post office was D-E-C-K-M-A-N, and the town was D-E-C-H-M-A-N. And I only uncovered that year before last, and I thought that that was an interesting thing, that our town was named one thing, spelled one way, and the post office was spelled another. And probably it was just the way the handwriting was presented to them. That's the only reason they could give me in Washington when I contacted them several times about that.
I'm sure this is probably true, but because back during this time there were an awful lot of our people that didn't spend a whole lot of time in schools.
Yes.
They were fighting bears and establishing roads and doing these other things. Yes, Dallas sort of started off as a place called Peter's Colony. And from Peter's Colony came Grand Prairie. In 1842, Peter's Colony was developed and started a town called Cedar Springs. Now, there's a Cedar Springs addition in Dallas today.
Yes.
The city itself never stayed, but that's the year that Grand Prairie began, and a family named Beeman, B-E-E-M-A-N, moved to the area from Illinois. They received 640 acres of land for moving here. Now, you sort of have to put yourself back there and understand what was going on, that we were fighting the Indians. We had just established our independence from Mexico. The Mexicans still hadn't just totally given up and capitulated. They were still raiding us. The Indians were raiding us. So what we were after, the state of Texas, was really we needed some people down here to protect what we had. And so if you'd come here with a family, we'd give you 640 acres of land. At that time, all of the land in our nation of Texas, and we were an independent nation then, belonged to the Republic of Texas. But the government said, if you'll come down here and bring your family, we'll give you 640 acres of land. And in 1930, 640 acres of land. Now, the Beemans, once they came, had bought up much more, but they donated 640 acres of land that today is the site of the State Fair of Texas.
Yes.
So they not only established the city of Grand Prairie,
gave them that
also
area.
gave the area for the State Fair of Texas, and the old ranger station that's out there today is the old Beeman home.
All right. We still have about a few minutes to talk about the post offices. I'd like for you to give the viewing audience the date that the name was changed in Grand Prairie from Deckman, D-E-C-K-M-A-N, to Grand Prairie, and who the postmaster was then.
Okay, the same man, Mr. William M. Haskett, was still postmaster at that time. He received a second appointment on August the 13th of 1877, but the name was changed to Grand Prairie on August the 13th of 1877. So we became Grand Prairie then, and before this name change, and even part of this name change, we were a great large amount of area. For instance, all of Cockrell Hill, what we know as Cockrell Hill in Dallas, was part of it then. Cedar Hill was part of it, and some parts of what is now Arlington, and even way over into Irving were all part of it. So we were a great body of land in the city of Grand Prairie. And we were a little farther south And when the railroad came through, we moved
A little bit to the
the
north.
downtown to the area that it is today.
All right.
Been here all these many years.
All right, now when you came to Grand Prairie in the 1962 era, how many patrons were there in town? How many postmen did you have working for you, and what was your delivery area about that time?
Okay, well, I actually came here as postmaster in 1979,
Okay.
and this will be my 11th year. When I came here as postmaster in 79, we had 33 city delivery routes and 2 rural routes. Today we have 60 city delivery routes and 14 rural routes, so we're 74. We're more than doubled in these 11 years.
And we do have 14 rural routes still continue in Grand Prairie, Texas.
Yes, we surely do.
Would you name us where some of these are? When we think of our mail coming on our city block and everything, we don't dream that we still have 14 rural routes in our city.
Well, let me clarify that for anyone that's listening and watching. You really don't have to live way off out in the country to be on a rural route, and
All
there are
right.
certain advantages to being on a rural route. For boundary line purposes, everything south of Interstate 20 is rural delivery, and there are 3 routes that are a little bit north. But everything south will be a rural route, and that's only to establish a boundary so that we don't have the city routes and the rural routes all running together. Technically, the rule says that anything outside the territory of the city routes is rural routes, but of course as we've grown, the city routes have grown all through there. When we first began, Grand Prairie only had 4 rural routes, and then city delivery was initiated many, many years after that.
All right. Now, tell us about the post office of today. We know where you're located on Carrier Parkway near Jefferson, up a little bit from the police station. What's going on down at the post office now? How many employees do you have? And tell us some good stuff about the post office.
Well, it's a really interesting time to work in the Postal Service right now. We have 2 brand new buildings. One is a most beautiful facility that's on Westchester Parkway that will service all of our growth area out south. It's at 765 Westchester Parkway and will be named the Westchester Station. And I'd invite anyone to come by and look. We're not open yet. We will be right away. We're in the closing stages. We have to put in the grass and do some final little things like that, but we're probably going to be open there in a couple of months. It's a beautiful, beautiful building. Doesn't look anything like what we think of a post office looking. We wanted something that would be attractive and inviting to our customers. Not only did we want to move to them and be closer and give them a much better opportunity, but we wanted something that they'd be proud of, and we think we've hit all of these goals. We have a brand new station also at 505 Fountain Parkway out near 360 northwest of town that'll serve all that big, huge business community out there. It's in about the same position that we hope to be in there and operating in a couple of months. But nonetheless, we're going to be in both of them and going strong well in advance of Christmas, so that everyone will be ready for us to come there. In 1972, we quit being, Congress decided to take us out of the cabinet. Up to that time, the Postmaster General was a member of the cabinet. We stopped that at this time, and we became what is known as a semi-quasi-government operation. And we were given a mandate by Congress to pay our own way, that we were not going to get any subsidies from the federal government anymore. We were given a time period of 10 years to stop and to make ourselves a self-supporting organization. We did this in 5 years. We haven't taken any money from federal treasuries now since somewhere around 77 for operations of the Postal Service itself. We are a totally independent organization, and each class of mail now is set up on a series of costs so that it pays its own way. And the postal user pay their own way, and I think they should be proud of this. We're going through several other new changes. We're always trying to be inventive and try to come up with better ways and easier ways to do what we're doing now. Our saying is, don't work harder, work smarter. And we're always trying to do a little better job for the customers to make them feel like that they are getting their money's worth, and we hope they feel that way. We know that with the 30-cent raise in stamps coming up, this is not making everybody happy, including myself. I have to pay the same price everyone else does. And I saw a cartoon the other day that I liked, and it showed two postal employees hiding behind a bush. And one of them asked the other, "What's happening?" And the other one said, "Well, they're upset about us going up on postage stamps. One of them just threw a 25 or a 50-cent candy wrapper at me, and the other threw a 50-cent Coke bottle at me." Well, when stamps were a nickel, so were Cokes and candy bars. Now Cokes and candy bars, if you can find them, are 50 cents. We're going up to 30 cents. We really feel like we give you a better value than a Coke and a candy bar.
All right. Now, Mr. Joe, you mentioned these three entities, one on Fountain Parkway, one in Westchester, and the one downtown. Will that all be under your direction as the postmaster here, and you'll have acting business managers in those, or are you going to have three postmasters, or what?
No.
And we have about 2 minutes left.
Okay. It'll be all under mine. It'll be under the postmaster, and there'll be station managers at each of these, and they will be in charge of that operation filtered down from the postmaster level.
And from Fountain Parkway, Westchester, and Grand Prairie, do you foresee any other enlargement of the post office system here in Grand Prairie?
Yes, the area south of Interstate 20, Grand Prairie now sits at a population of roughly 100,000. As you know, in the next 15 to 25 years, they're expecting 250,000 south of Interstate 20. We already have plans to split their area out there, not only with zip codes, but with buildings and with the ability to handle the customer workload.
All right, in about the last minute that we have, I'd like for you to look out into your camera over where Jody is today and really tell any of the young people that may be watching our show how exciting it is to work for the Postal Service. And when you see me draw an X on here, that means you're about out of time. So look out and let's talk about how important it would be to work for the post office.
Well, I think it's very important. First of all, we're the paymasters of the nation. We deliver more checks, retirement, Social Security, all of the other type of benefit checks. We sustain the livelihood of more people than any other organization in the world. We touch the life of almost every citizen in the nation. Right in our city of Grand Prairie, almost every citizen here receives 3 pieces of mail every day. We go to every house. You meet a lot of great people. Good work. The dogs, we can live with those. The wind, the rain, the snow, we can live with those. It's a good job, and I'd encourage anyone to come to work for the United States Postal Service.
And you have been a postmaster in Grand Prairie for a long time.
11 years.
11 years, and you've been also very good in the community. In the 1 minute we have left, tell us any clubs that you belong to, and I know that you work with the Red Cross in a very great way, and give us 1 minute of that.
Well, I was a member of the Kiwanis Club for many years, and we did a lot of organizations. I worked with the youth and recreation through many of the ball teams and boys baseball and all of those, and the women's softball league and all this sort of thing. My family was very active in the athletic part of it, and I did work as the representative of the mayor to the American Red Cross for several years also.
Mr. Joe Cantrell, it's been a delight having you on our show and interviewing you about yourself personally and also about your tenure with the Postal Service and especially with Grand Prairie. And we're just so thankful to have had you on the show.
It's been fun.
Good.
Thank you.
And this is Ruthie Jackson reminding you that history is as we live and do.